Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1967. The topic is training, and the title is Where to Properly Apply Intensity in Strength Training. So over half of my clients are personal trainers, and many of them specialize in strength-related sports, such as powerlifting, training athletes, explosive athletes, strongman, and CrossFit. And there are other ones, weightlifting and whatnot. But there's a lot of the trainers deal with specifically those sports and with strength-based training. You would then think, well, why are they working with me? Typically, it's because they stalled out on progress on their own. So they were trying everything they knew, and it just didn't seem to be working. So they reached out for what I would know. And or they got an injury. They got hurt. And through a friend of a friend or a client referral, somebody told them, hey, this guy can help out. So if they're trainers, if they already know a lot about programming, they already know a lot about what they're doing, how am I actually able to step in and make a difference? One aspect is with proper intensity regulation, teaching people where their intensity should be and how intense it should be during training. There are other factors such as nutrition. I have a master's in nutrition. I've been doing nutrition for over 20 years, and it is definitely something I help people with, and that's a huge element. So if somebody has a great training knowledge background, but they don't have a great nutrition background, that could easily be one of the reasons why they've stalled out. It could actually be one of the reasons why they got injured. I also help with exercise selection, programming variations. There's actually a lot of ways to structure programs for individual needs. And accountability. A lot of them are working and overwhelmed with a lot of things, so they let me do some of the thinking for them, and it helps to know that somebody gives a crap and somebody's checking in on them with their nutrition and video reviews and whatnot. So there's a lot of reasons why I can help, but the one that I wanted to touch on today was proper intensity regulation within their programming. When most people train for strength, they tend to push the main lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, to just max effort, like all out. And that's actually incorrect. That's one of the reasons why they stall out. That's one of the reasons why they get injured. That is not where you want your full intensity. Now, when we think about intensity, one of the ways I want to kind of give some context to it in today's podcast is through the RPE scale, rate of perceived exertion. If we're going to use a scale, commonly what is used in like powerlifting or strength-based training is a scale of 1 to 10, but nobody uses 1 to 5. So 1 would be like you're lying in bed. 5 is maybe you're sitting on a couch and you have an itch, so you have to raise your hand over your head to scratch your head. But 5 is usually you're moving, but it's submaximal. You're just kind of maybe warming up on an Echo bike, just going for a walk on a treadmill, just to get some blood flow. So 5 is I'm technically alive and moving, but there's really no challenge to this. 6 is maybe a small midge, like a smidge above that. 7 is okay. It's starting to get some light burn. There's starting to be some challenge to this for sure. Like I can feel this now. 8 is okay. This is challenging. I can do it right. My technique is good. There's maybe some small little variations in technique because of how challenging it is. It's definitely challenging, but it's definitely doable. 9 is things are starting to break down. You can do it, but your knees starting to cave in on squats. You're starting to kind of hinge more at the hips. Bench press, you're starting to bounce it off your chest rather than actually trying to pause and drive it off your chest. Maybe your butt's starting to lift up off the bench. Deadlift, you're starting to hitch a little bit in your lockout. So 9 means we're doing it, but things are breaking down. 10 is maybe you did it, maybe you didn't, maybe you died, maybe you didn't. 10 is like full send. Think if you're at a competition and you're like, I am willing to break bones and tear muscles, I will do whatever I have to do to get this lift. That is a 10. So using that scale, we can kind of put intensity into perspective. What most people do is on the large lifts, the main lifts, they do like 9 and 10s. And then on their accessories, they half-ass it and do like a 6 or a 7. That is what most people do and how most people kind of allocate their intensity in their programming. And that is wrong. It's flat out the problem. It is the reason why they're going to stall out, why they're going to get hurt, why things are just not going to go well. And that is what I help my clients do, is to better control that intensity allocation. So what we're really looking for is main lifts. The biggest, largest lifts, we're looking for like an 8 RPE. So typically, this is not always, but typically I have to bring down their intensity a little bit. You do have clients every now and then who are absolute perfectionists, and they'll do something and they're like, that was on the edge of what I could do, perfect. And I'm like, that looks like a 4 RPE. Like, it doesn't even look like you're sweating. We have got to try a little bit harder. So there are clients, now, the caveat, I say it much better when I talk to them in person. So I'm not saying they're not trying hard, but meaning like the stimulus needs to be harder. So the effort is always 100%, which I appreciate and I care for, which is why I wanted to correct myself in that sense to make sure that it was understood. I was not saying try harder in regards to effort, more so try harder as in the intensity of like the hard, how hard it feels. There we go. Try to get my foot out of my mouth here. So the reason why I wanted to correct that was I really do care because I know they're trying hard. I know that they care. If you've hired somebody to help you, you care a lot. So I don't want that to ever come across that way. So in those cases, what I'm going to promote them to do is we actually try to teach how to regulate higher intensity. One of the methods I'll have them do is I'll have them do a weight that I'm like, they could probably do 6 or 7 reps here. And this is educated guessing from a lot of years of training a lot of people. So I'll say they could probably do 6 or 7 reps. Let me have them do 3 sets of 4. And then on the 4th set, I just want them to push themselves to what they feel is good form failure. So they'll get their 3 sets of 4, 4, 4, 4. And then on that last one, maybe they get 6. And then I ask them in their journal, online journal, I say, how did that feel? And they're like, oh, that felt really hard. And I said, well, did you feel your technique was breaking down? Did you feel that one more rep was possible, or that like, oh my gosh, there was no way you would have finished that rep? Usually they're going to say, well, maybe I could have done it. To which I'll say, okay, well, I want you to remember that feeling of how 6 felt. And then next time we do that, see if you can do the 6 again. If after the 6th rep, you kind of have this moment of saying, maybe I could get a 7th. Let's try it. Let's try it and see what we can do. And that'll help. And over time, we increase their intensity perception. And that is a technique I'll use when somebody's kind of not used to intense enough style training. But for the most part, most people, they're actually too intense with their main lifts. So they'll go a 9 or a 10 RPE, and they'll be like, for example, say they're doing a lift and they're supposed to get a set of 3, and they're like, I got 3. And I'm like, yeah, but like number one, the first one looked good. Number 2 looked like we damn near died. I am surprised you even tried the 3rd. I don't know how the hell you even got it. So what we would say is if it's squats, for example, I would know their technique issue. So maybe one of their technique issues is as they descend in the squat, they don't externally rotate their knees enough, and it causes a forward angled bar path, which causes the bar to be kind of forward of their center of gravity coming out of the bottom, which means their hips rise first, then they have to finish the lift basically with their lower back. And I'll say, hey, if you look at number 1, the bar path was actually pretty damn good. It was almost perfectly vertical. Number 2, we came down halfway vertical, and then we kind of shot forward. Meaning we rotated our knees out some, halfway down, then we got kind of nervous, got a little cautious, our body protected itself so it didn't rotate out anymore. We then just hinged forward, the bar got out in front of us, we had to use our lower back to damn near good morning the thing back to the top. Then the 3rd one, surprised you tried it, good for you, but we had no knee external rotation and it looked like a good morning the whole freaking time. So what I would tell them is, hey, next time, instead of a set of 3, let's do 3 sets of 1. Let's do 3 sets of 1, so that way each of the reps look good. And that's extremely important because that reinforces proper technique. That means that we're setting the autopilot for the lift, the automated way in which the body will perform that lift. We want it to be consistent to good patterning. So that way we don't have to, like, that way, number one, we're safe. Number two, we are able to output the most energy, like the most strength in that lift. Number three is it's important to have the subconscious believe that proper technique is the strongest pathway. So that way, whenever you do push to a 10 RPE in a competition or an event, a contest or a game or whatever the situation might be for that athlete, is we want the body to trust the pathway that is most safe. So therefore, we have to move consistently in that pathway over and over and over and over. So for example, if the body thinks the way to protect itself is to close its knees and do a good morning, that's actually faulty because it's going to cause a lower back injury. We want the body to trust to continue to externally rotate the knees to properly load the adductors. So that way we get proper recruitment of all the muscles that support the hip structure in the lower back. So that way when we drive out of the bottom, we have the quads involved, we have the adductors helping, we have the glutes, and they're all balancing and supporting the lower back. So the lower back isn't left all on its own to do that performance. So making sure that we move in the proper technique, meaning we hold our intensity at an 8 RPE, ensures that we're moving in the proper pathways that reinforces and develops that automated kind of pathway, that autopilot. So that way, whenever we're in a competition where we're going full send, we're going 10 RPE, we're in a moment of emergency in a competition or contest, event, whatever, we always are going to move in that safest and strongest pathway because that's the pathway the body has believed in and the only one we've let it move in. So that's very important. The other reason is if we move in the proper pathway, the right muscles get the right amount of stimulus and the right range of motion. So if we're always, kind of letting our technique break down in that squat example, we're always underloading the adductors. The adductors are always going to be weak. Your lower back is always going to be overtrained and strained. Therefore, you're always a moment away from getting injured. Your adductors will always be the weak link. They will never get any better. You're going to plateau. So then somebody like me comes along and says, hey, everything's looking good overall. I need you to externally rotate your knees more. Let's take 20 pounds off your squat and just practice more consistency and better technique. Then all of a sudden, 3 months goes by and you're hitting brand new PRs and you're like, what the hell? I was doing the same thing. And I'm just like, kind of sort of yes and kind of sort of no. So what the problem was before is we were going too intense, technique was breaking down, and we weren't reinforcing the proper pathways, we weren't stimulating the right muscles in the right range of motion. So cleaning up the technique, making sure it's consistent is insanely, incredibly important. And how we do that is by maintaining a healthy intensity, meaning an 8 RPE. If we do it any easier than that, 6 or 7 RPE, it's just not it's not maximizing the stimulus potential of the movement, meaning we could get actually faster results if we did a little more intense. But if we go to a 9 or a 10 intensity and the technique starts breaking down, we start moving in a pathway other than the optimal pathway, then we're not going to make progress. So we're looking for that sweet spot of we moved the rep correctly, but it was as hard as I could possibly do correctly. And for most people, in the scope of an RPE, that's going to be at an 8 RPE. So this is conceptual. There's not like an 8 RPE isn't a measurable thing, but I want to go through this concept so you can have some thought as to how you feel during the lift. And this is also why I encourage clients to film themselves. I encourage anyone to film themselves, but clients especially because I have to be able to see their lifts. So I work with people online and in every time zone, literally from Hawaii to New Zealand. I have clients in both places, and they're on each end of the spectrum of time zones. So I have people who are lifting at any time of the day, you name it. I cannot be present for all of those virtually. So I have them film themselves, and then with a Google Doc, They'll send me their videos either WhatsApp if they're not from the United States, or on Instagram. And then people local to the United States are usually Instagram, Facebook Messenger. They can text me if they want, but the quality is usually better through Instagram or Facebook Messenger. So I'll watch their videos and then I'll give them feedback on their videos. If I see that their intensity is under the 8 RPE, I'll encourage them to try a little harder. I'll even adjust their programming to the weights that are listed to make sure it's the correct. If they're going over the 8 RPE, I'll correct them on technique, things we can look for the next week, and I'll even adjust the weights if we need to. So I watch their videos and I watch and see, and I eventually teach over time what is an RPE of 8. So that way they can start to really gain that experience, gain that knowledge, and know, okay, if a lift feels like this, then I know it's good. And that's what I want them to do. So then what we look for is in the accessories. So we said most people go 9-10 RPE on the main lifts, and then they kind of half-ass their accessories. Now, they'll say they're not half-assing them, but they're so damn exhausted from the main lifts that they're kind of not putting in that great of an effort in the accessories. And that's, even if you have if you're mentally strong, if you just tend, a bunch of 10 RPEs on main lifts, there's nothing much left to give to your accessories. So we want to bring the main lifts down to an 8 RPE. And then for most people, that means the accessory lifts, we actually move up to an 8 RPE. So typically they're doing 6 or 7. They're just kind of going through them. They're like, oh yeah, I had a pretty good burn. I'm like, nah, I don't want a pretty good burn. I want like a damn near splitting your skin burn. I want that lift to be freaking miserable, like you hated it. And technique again was about to break down. You didn't want to do 1 or 2 more reps, even if you could. You're like, damn, that was awful. That was miserable, super burn, really intense, super challenging. That's what we want the accessories to be. It's important because the accessories are isolative to our weak patterns or weak positions and our weak tissues. When I write the accessories I want for my clients, they're literally specific for what that person needs. Like whatever their weakness is, we're going to isolate the hell out of that thing and we're going to crush it. So if we have specific patterns, specific positions, specific tissues that we want maximally stimulated, we want to stimulate them maximally. We want to give a crap when we're in those patterns, positions, and tissues. So getting a good enough RPE is important because that creates the adaptation response that we want. So having an 8 RPE is extremely important because we're actually pinpointed to the weaknesses, to the things that are holding back our main lifts. And it's important because in a main lift, for example, if I give 100% to a main lift, that 100% is allocated across all muscles involved, meaning our weakest link might only get 10% of that intensity, maybe 20% of that intensity. But if I have an accessory that moves me in a position or pathway specific to the main lift and I give 100% there, I'm now getting maybe 80% directly into my weak link. So accessory exercises, when chosen correctly, are much more pinpointed to the weaknesses. So therefore, when we give maximal intensity, meaning an 8 RPE, maximal optimal intensity, then we're going to get maximal optimal results. So it's really important not to blow through these accessories because they are so damn important. They're actually to the nitty-gritty details of what we really want to grow and build. So it's really important that we don't blow past the accessories. We do want to make sure that we have a proper intensity range, which would be an 8 RPE. And that way, we're not going too intense or we're going to get injured, because if it is an isolated position, you do run the risk of a higher potential of injury. So we don't want to go 9 and 10, especially not 10s. We don't want a bunch of 10 efforts on accessories, because if you're doing isolated positions, that can cause injuries. So it's important to stay calmer at an 8 RPE, but again, we don't want a 6 or a 7 because you're just leaving results on the table. So when we think about proper application of intensity in strength-based training, the main lifts, we want to be around an 8 RPE. We want it to be very challenging, but very good technique. Then the accessories, we want an 8 RPE. Again, very challenging, but very good and very safe technique. So I would encourage you to kind of double check yourself in your strength-based training and say, okay, where am I giving my intensity? What rate would what rate of RPE would I give to these things? So when we do main lifts, we're looking for an 8 RPE. When we're doing accessories, an 8 RPE. And again, that's not full send. It's not whatever the hell we have to do to just move the weight. We don't want any technique. We want the right technique. So I hope this helps. I hope it gives you some context to apply and think through in your next workout. And that way you can prevent yourself from stalling out, you can prevent yourself from injury, and hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, if you need anything, you can always reach out on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. We have free nutrition education, free training education stuff on the page, plus all the different services we have. Tons of things right now. Just basically helping people in whatever way they ask me. So if you're interested in help, you can check out the different services we have on the website for more information. And again, that's www.brutalirongym.com. Okay, well, if you like the podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. Also, if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.